Thank you, great to be here. Nigel tried to up the ante a little bit by saying, we're just on this fantastic film with Alan. It's absolutely marvellous. I'm not going to tell you the details, but it's really fantastic. So I chucked out my rather dull academic talk, which I'd thrown together very easily and ran through a few key points about obesity and thought I'd try and do something a bit different. God knows whether it will work or not, but I hope it will at least make us think of some of the ideas. But I guess just a little bit of background, which I know Alan well, and I thought might perhaps just link between the two. I'm going to talk entirely about obesity and overnutrition, and I'm going to talk heavily, I have to say, with a UK context. That's partly because that's where I mostly work, and I can give you the most examples of. But I think it's also important to remember that what's happening here is coming to many other countries remarkably fast. So although I'm founded in the UK, we maybe can learn some lessons here to help people avoid some of the mistakes we've slipped into. I've spent all my career trying to understand how people control their body weight and what happens when that goes wrong and why it goes wrong and what are the consequences of that. And one of the things that I think you can't escape from is that humans are endowed with an ancient metabolism. For thousands and thousands of years, generations, we have lived in a world where food was scarce and where the energy you needed to expend to get that food was really high. It was very hard to become overweight because energy expenditure was high and the availability of food to eat was low. And that has set up our whole body's metabolism. Years and years of evolution have selected for those people who were very efficient, those people who could survive the famine, those who had the so-called thrifty gene. Slightly simplistic hypothesis, but it's a convenient one. If you could get through the famine because you were very efficient at using food, you were going to survive and hand your genes on. So our bodies, if you like, are programmed to see food and eat it. Makes no sense to see delicious, safe, tasty food and not to want to consume it because there might be a famine tomorrow. Now, of course, in the world we live in here in Britain, that famine tends not to come. So the problem is we've got this metabolism which is programmed to eat, and we have got a world in which food is everywhere. And our metabolism is completely ill-equipped to cope with a world where food is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, almost at every turn. When I was small, which was not that long ago, when we were going on our summer holidays from Manchester down to the south coast, we'd pack a Tupperware box and a thermos flask because you might not be able to get anything to eat on the way. And now, of course, you can buy a 3-course meal in a petrol station. And of course, this problem is completely compounded by the fact we do so little. We have completely astonishingly sedentary lives. You can go through the entire day without ever getting out of breath. You don't even have to make the bed, you just chuck the duvet on it. You know, the doors open automatically in front of you. You take the escalator. It's unbelievable how little energy people need to burn off. Some people do, but they go out in search of energy, of expenditure. They make an active choice to do something more physically active. So we've got this complete double whammy. Food everywhere, completely available and accessible, and absolutely no need to burn off any energy at all. And that, I'm afraid, together with our metabolism, means that the only surprising thing is that we're not all obese. Utterly astonishing how any of us stay thin. The problem is that fewer and fewer people manage to stay thin. Now, I've got very few graphs, but just bear with me. This just goes back to 1993, not that long ago. But if you go back to mid-80s, only about 8% of adults were what we call clinically obese. Let's not agonize over the definition. 8% of people were defined by doctors as being obese in the 1980s. By 1993, that was up to about 15%. It's now up to 25%. A quarter of adults are clinically obese. If you want to take a lesser definition of overweight, 2/3 of adults are overweight. Overweight is the norm. And norms are very powerful. You know, we're social animals. We act like a kind of herd. We do what most people do. And what most people do leads to most people being overweight. That's quite important to think about. And of course, it's not just adults. I think the thing which has brought obesity to everybody's attention is recognizing that children today don't really look like children even 20 years ago, 30 years ago. When I look back at my old school pictures, we all look like skinny little wretches. Now, okay, when you go into schools now, it's not that most children are obese. They're not. Put aside the headlines. Most children are not obese, but many of them are overweight. And they tend to have a much more rounded look. You don't see, generally, 10-year-olds where you can see their ribs. Let me tell you, it's perfectly normal to see the ribs of a 10-year-old. That is a normal, healthy weight. Actually, you don't see it very often. And so children are getting fatter and fatter. And this is data, again, showing what's happened in children or young people 2 to 15 years. Bit of minor cause for optimism. Have to hang on to something. But this is beginning to look a little bit like a plateau, but a plateau at an unacceptably high level. The other thing which is really worrying is that although we're saying here about 15% of children are obese, that is not evenly distributed within the population. There is a huge social divide. And it's not just that that little group over there who are particularly disadvantaged have got the problem and everyone else is okay. It's a completely continuous distribution. So this is areas of the country divided up into what we call deciles, so 10% of the most deprived at this end, the least deprived at the other end. I think it is scandalous that just where you live will give a child double the chance of being obese because they are living in the most deprived areas in the country. They're going to have twice the chance of being obese of the highest. And even worse, not shown here, is that gap is getting wider. So although we've seen the overall level of obesity in children beginning to tail off, the difference between the richest and the poorest is getting wider. That's something which should worry us all. So that's my little bit of background. What I didn't put in the slide, but I think I'll say, because I don't think Alan really drove it home, it's very tempting, and I would completely agree with the, if people are at death's door, you've got to rescue them now. And there is the burden of undernutrition and stunting on a population and on an economy is really serious. It acts as a drag in the whole economy if you've got a batch of children who are not meeting their full economic potential. But perhaps what he didn't make the case for is the cost of overweight and obesity. The cost is enormous. Obesity isn't an issue of how people look. I don't mind how people look. I do mind about their health. You know, being obese increases the risk of so many diseases, all the metabolic diseases, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, the mechanical problems, respiratory disease, back pain, joint problems, lots of psychological ill health goes with it too. There's a whole raft of ill health. And that's costing the NHS a fortune, and it's costing the economy a fortune too, because people do have more time off work. They do end up having to finish work early, and so we are losing a huge amount of economic potential from obesity as well as undernutrition. The biggest link for obesity is with diabetes. Now, it's perfectly possible to live very, healthy, long lives with diabetes, but many people don't. So diabetes is the leading cause of renal failure in this country. It's the leading cause of blindness in this country. It's the leading cause of limb amputations in this country. And that's not the worst of it, because most people with diabetes will die of heart disease. It's a huge burden for individuals, for families, and for the rest of us. So that's the background. Let's just think, what can we do about it? And I want to do that by kind of walking you through the day, and I hope, it's a bit of an extreme example, but I hope some of these scenarios will resonate with you. So, wake up, alarm goes off. What are you going to do? Lie there for an extra 10 minutes in bed, or get up in time to have breakfast? Tricky choice, we all make it. Some people will get up and have breakfast, other people will skip breakfast. That's a bad start to the day. We know people who skip breakfast are much more likely to be obese because they're far more likely to snack later on in the day on things which in general are less healthy. So you get up and maybe you'll make a healthy choice, and we know that people who have particularly breakfast cereal for breakfast tend to have much better quality diets than others. Now, it would be lovely to think everybody would walk to school, but of course the change in schools policy means that there isn't a local school you can walk to. Your school's actually 5 miles away. So how are you going to get there? Well, usually you go on the bus, and that's a 10-minute walk to the bus stop. So do you walk it, or do you sort of ask mum or dad if they could just drop you off at the bus stop on the way? You know, saves 10 minutes. What are you going to do? Hop on the bus, get off at the other end, just on your way to school. Oh, goodness, the little corner shop, and they have these fantastic hot pasties. Really, really quite tasty, particularly if you've not had breakfast. You know, it's almost that smell coming out of the shop. It smells really good. Maybe you'll just pop in and have a sausage roll on the way. Tastes quite good. Then into class, gets to mid-morning break. Mum, helpful mum, really trying to do the right thing. She's giving you an apple, a couple of crumpets in your bag. God, they're all a bit squashed now. You know, the apple's a bit bruised, doesn't really look very nice. Well, everybody else is going to the tuck shop. Well, yeah, okay, pop to the tuck shop with everyone else. Much more fun, much more sociable. But maybe you could have a game of football. So, you know, Ben comes along, tries to persuade you to get involved in his, you know, little five-a-side tournament. You could play football, go and have a bit of a run around, or, well, it's a bit dull, it's quite cold outside, you know. Oh, I may as well just sit here with this bagel, and I'll just stay in the canteen and catch up. I haven't seen my other friends for a while either. Gets to lunchtime. Just had a bagel, but guys, Friday. Friday's the one day of the week when the canteen has chips. We don't get chips any other time, so I'd be mad not to have them now they're here. I better have the fish and chips. So now it's after school, and actually quite a healthy family. Do lots of swimming, competition coming up tomorrow, and so could go and do a bit of extra training. But it's Friday, and on Fridays I usually go with my mates and have a milkshake in town on the way home. Well, I'm going to swim tomorrow in the competition. I've done quite a bit of training this week already, so maybe it wouldn't really matter if I didn't go today. Let's be optimistic, hope you make the right choice. Go off to the swimming bath, quite thirsty. Better have something before we start. Vending machine, what's in there? Oh, loads of sugary drinks. Oh, they look quite good. Should I have some water? Should I have a sugary drink? God blimey, it's the same price to have a bottle of water as it is to have a can of Coke. Well, who wouldn't? Finish the swimming, Dad picks you up. Oh, he's had a terrible week. Does nothing but complain all the way home, what a tough it is, how tired he is. And Mum's out tonight. She has left you some nice chicken stir-fried veg, so you can cook something really quickly when you get home. Oh, but we've all had a bad day, and there's a big poster advertising the local drive-thrus just opened. You look at Dad. Oh, we're boys. We don't want stir-fried vegetables, do we? Let's just pop and have a burger. So off we go. We go to the burger place. And what do you usually have when you go to a burger place with your friends? Well, you usually just have a burger and chips, because that's relatively cheap. So that's fine. Then you look at it, you're with Dad, and he's ordering. He looks and he says, God blimey, you know, we could have the large. Look, they've got a meal deal on. We can go large. It's only 40p more. So even though you usually feel perfectly full after burger and chips, it'd be mad not to, wouldn't it? It's only 40p more. There we go. Quick double burger and chips. Get home. Collapse in front of the telly, film you've really been wanting to watch for ages. It's about to come on. Get the telly. Oh, here's the adverts first. There's that Gary Lineker again. Walker's Chris. Actually, watching a film, it would be quite good to have a bag of crisps, maybe some popcorn. I'll just go and have a look what's in the cupboard. Now, if Mum was at home, she'd say, if you're in my house, if you're hungry, go and have a piece of fruit. But Mum's not at home. And you know, there is a bag of crisps in the cupboard, so I'll just go and do that. And then, ready to go to bed. What do you have now? Little snack before you go up. Quick drink. Is that a tea and a biscuit? Or is that a hot chocolate and, yeah, a little bit of chocolate on the side? Up to bed. Do you jump into bed? Well, just check the computer. Haven't just checked quick bit of Facebooking, just have a little look, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that leads to something else, leads to something else. Do you know, it's really good evidence that the shorter you sleep, the more likely you are to be overweight. Now, that might be because it's disrupting all sorts of metabolic rhythms. It might just be you're up that much longer and you've got that much more chance to eat. What you see here is a whole day in which a whole catalogue of individual decisions, individual moments of the day where you can make a choice, and some might say that's a personal choice. You could make a better choice. But you've also seen a whole load of circumstances, whether they're social things, whether they're economic things, or whether they're policy decisions like where your local school is, which have actually tipped the choice that you might make. They've made one choice more likely than the other. And when you put all of that together, what you see is if you work all of that through, if you had made the healthy choice for food on every single one of those occasions, one of my dutiful students worked this out for me yesterday, you'd have had about 2,500 calories. If you'd made the unhealthy choice on each of those occasions, it would have been 3,500 calories. What about energy expenditure? So if you'd made the healthy choice every time, you'd have burned off that, a little bit less if it was the unhealthy choice. I've biased this very much to make the differences in food because we're mostly talking about food today, but it's also true that it's much easier to generate those differences in food than it is in physical activity. What does that mean overall? Well, healthy choice, this is your intake. It's offset by your energy expenditure. And in fact, if you'd done the healthiest food and the healthiest activity, you'd have ended up just minorly in what we'd call negative energy balance. And that shows there's plenty of space for the odd treat, if you like, along the way. On the other hand, if you'd taken all the unhealthy choices, you'd have been in positive energy balance. You'd have eaten more calories that day than you've burned off. And that puts you on the road to gaining too much weight. If that was repeated every day for the whole week, you'd gain 2 pounds a kilo in just 1 week. That is how easy it is to sleepwalk into obesity. And that's why I started by saying what's utterly astonishing is that more of us are not overweight. So, what I want you to think about is 2 things. Firstly, who is responsible for those diet and lifestyle choices that we make on a daily basis? Is it down to individuals? You have to, relatively few people are unaware that biscuits, cakes, chocolate, confectionery and sugary drinks are not healthy choices. Relatively few people. Relatively few people are unaware that fruit and veg are quite good choices. So, sure, a bit more education would always help, but it's not fundamentally about education, it's about something else. Is it about individuals? For children, is it about parents? If mum had not left that bag of crisps in the cupboard, they wouldn't have been eaten. First rule in our house, if you don't want it eaten, don't buy it. Is it bigger than that? Is it about the local authority planning? Really unhelpful having a pasty shop right outside the front gate? Is it about national government closing the local schools so you have to flipping well be driven to school? Is it about the food industry making available all those unhealthy choices, making money for the economy? How shocking is that? What is it about advertising? Is it about promotions? Who is responsible for the choices, and where do we need to direct our action if we're going to turn this around? And secondly, it's a bit like Alan's question, where do you start? There are 101 points of potential intervention. Where do you start? Do you start with the easiest, which might not be the most effective? Do you start with one which is more systemic? Do you have to do them all together? Where do you begin? And one of the problems I think that besets this area, something that Tim Lang, who's going to speak later, and I have talked about a lot, is that obesity is a complex system. Everything's connected to everything else. And when you start mapping responsibilities, you find there are so many people with responsibilities all over the show that it is very, very easy for everyone to say, well, mine is only a small bit. Somebody else needs to act first. And I think one of the biggest problems we have is that we're all quite good telling everybody else what they should do. We're much less good about doing the things that are within our own sphere of influence. But aside from that, there's the problem of how do you, if you're a policymaker, begin to make those decisions. If you want to tackle the food industry, if you think the food industry is the most important thing, government can do things there, but that takes time, energy and resources to make that happen. Should they be putting that time, energy and resources into planning policy or something else? So those are the questions for you. Who's responsible and where do you start? Thank you.